try a few different types of meditation and find one that helps you to relax, feel good, because one thing is certain in the future. It's going to be stressful. So you need somewhere to go inside yourself that you can let it all go and find some peace.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Jonathan Robinson, who will help you to find enlightenment and happiness. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and create harmony to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. Today's quote is from Anthony DeMello. By the way, we just had on Don Joseph Goey from his foundation back in episode 328. Here's the quote. There is only one cause of unhappiness, the false beliefs you have in your head. Beliefs so widespread, so commonly held, that it never occurs to you to question them. Today, we'll question them as we chat about enlightenment and how to find your path to it. Before we do that, would you like to join and meet me in person? I'm going to be in Phoenix speaking at a conference on real estate and wealth building and just hanging out with some of my friends. You've heard some of them on the podcast before, and we're going to be talking about life and money. I'd love to see if you can make it, and I'll hang out and answer all your questions. I'll put a link in the show notes on how to get your ticket and a discount. I have to admit, sometimes it seems so hard to find enlightenment. Just look at Buddha. How long was his path and what did he go through? Our guest is going to share how some people find it in moments. Wouldn't that be awesome? The secret is they find their own method. They don't follow someone else's path. Maybe that's not the answer you wanted, but it's what you needed. By the way, we can be enlightened and have lots of money. It is not an either or, so you don't need to make a choice. And we'll chat about that today as well. Jonathan Robinson is a psychotherapist, a best-selling author of 14 books, has reached over 200 million people around the world with his practical methods, and his work has been translated in over 47 languages. He's made numerous appearances on The Oprah Show and CNN, as well as other national TV talk shows. And now here he is on Richer Soul. His most recent book is called The Enlightenment Project, How I Went From Depressed to Blessed, and You Can Too. He shares the methods, stories, and ideas he's learned from interviewing 100 spiritual teachers, ranging from Deepak Chopra, the Dalai Lama, the late Mother Teresa, Wayne Dyer, and Ram Dass. Mr. Robinson has spoken to many companies such as Microsoft, IBM, Coca-Cola, and Google. And now he's here to speak with what? With us. Let's meet our guest. Welcome to Richer Soul, Jonathan Robinson. It's great to have you join us today.
This will be fun.
I'm excited to learn from you today. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Well, I was kind of lucky in that I grew up in an upper middle class, family, and everybody in my family was completely miserable. So I learned very early that money was not the key to making people happy. And I kind of had my midlife crisis at age 12, where I was like suicidally depressed and just really out of sorts. So I started to read books, self-help books around age 12 to do three things. Get control of my mind through hypnosis and meditation, learn manifestation, like Think and Grow Rich, and learn how to have better relationships, because I saw that the trajectory my family was on was not going to be good.
So that's interesting. Why were they miserable even though they had money?
Well, I think of it that they had money, but they didn't have any communication skills. They didn't have any mental, emotional skills. And my mom and dad just didn't like each other. So, one of the things you learn in the happiness research, I've written a couple books about happiness, is that relationships are the key to happiness, much more so than money.
They very much are. And that was the outcome of the Harvard Grant study. They followed people for, 60, 70 years. And the number one factor across everything was basically that is, what were your relationships like? And that is what made all of the difference in there.
Yeah. My latest book is called The Enlightenment Project. And I see that when people actually get into these expanded states of consciousness, that they are even happier. So I got interested in that around age 15. I started early. And at some point, I was living in a van in my 20s. And I realized that I had associated money with a lot of selfishness and greed and such. So I worked to change my associations about money. Because, if you're associated with bad things, you're not going to want to make it. But living in the van, I realized that everything I wanted to do in life required money. I wanted to travel. I wanted to take a bunch of workshops. I wanted to meet famous spiritual teachers, etc. So I got some books that helped me to change my relationship with money. And I went from living in my van to being a millionaire in about 4 years.
That's interesting. We're going to talk about that. But before we do that, let's go back to 12.
Okay.
How at 12 do you start reading these self-help books and things? I mean, that's usually not the choice a 12-year-old makes.
Right. Well, I was pretty smart, and I didn't really have any other resources. I couldn't pay for therapy. I couldn't get out of my family. And so I turned to books. Luckily, my uncle was a hypnotist. And he would occasionally hypnotize like my normally shy sister to become Mick Jagger. And she would like jump up on the table and start singing, "I Can't Get No Satisfaction." And I realized, wow, he totally changed her identity in like 3 minutes. Well, I'd like to change my identity from, a loser, depressed teenager to someone who might, actually enjoy life. So that's how I got into hypnosis originally.
Interesting. And were the books enough to solve the problem, or did you need more help beyond the books?
Everything helps. I never went to a therapist because my parents wouldn't pay for it. But, between hypnosis and meditation, and then I got into psychedelic drugs, of course, and realized there's a whole world of stuff going on that I don't know about. So I actually, at UCLA and UC Santa Barbara, I did research on psychedelic drugs and MDMA, better known as ecstasy, to kind of study these expanded states of consciousness. In fact, my master's thesis was on the therapeutic effects of MDMA on post-traumatic stress disorder. And then 2 weeks later, they made it illegal.
It's coming back around, though, right?
Yeah, it's going to be made legal next year again.
Ah, okay. Interesting. So let's take a step forward. You go from living in a van to becoming a millionaire in 4 years. How did you do that?
luckily, all these things kind of work together. So I got very good at quieting my mind. When I'd quiet my mind, I'd ask the question, how can I better serve people and make a lot of money doing it? And one day I heard a voice that said, you should do a video on tantric sexuality. Now, I only had $100 to my name, and the video was going to cost $50,000 to make. And I didn't know anything about video or marketing or business. And my girlfriend at the time said I knew nothing about sexuality. So we were definitely starting from square one. But because I was good at learning from books, I got a bunch of books. Long story short, made the video, and it ended up being the best-selling educational video in America and got on the cover of Newsweek.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Is that what drove the money, was selling the video, or was it something else?
Yeah. Okay. No, it was the video.
Now, was this, by this point, were you already a psychotherapist or still studying?
I was already a psychotherapist. I was able to skip a couple of grades because I was good at school. So I was a psychotherapist like at age 22. Not having lived life at all, but I still had my degree.
What led you to choose that path?
Well, having a screwed up family helped. So I wanted to know what led to happiness and peace. And I figured psychotherapy was as good and psychology was as good a path as any. And nothing else really appealed to me. So, I wanted to learn some of this stuff so I could apply it to myself. My brother and sister to this day are in really bad shape. But because I've spent, 40 years working on my stuff, life is good.
Why do you think they weren't able to make that switch like you did?
I think different people have different interests. Some people at age 7, they want to be a tennis player. My brother wanted to be a lawyer. My sister wanted to be a housewife. And, we all have different aptitudes. They were never into the self-help thing. It wasn't until recently that they had ever read any of my books. I have 14 of them. But now they're going through a hard time. So they're saying, hey, this book is really good. Why didn't you send it to us before? Of course I did. But, if somebody doesn't have the interest, I don't try to push it on them.
No, I was having that conversation this morning with one of my clients, and we talked about the fact that 98% of people just don't take action. So stop wasting your time there. Focus on the ones who are going to do something and help them to do what they want to do and let them go down that path. So let's take a step back. You did your studies in the psychedelic drugs. Mm-hmm. What do they help people to achieve or to do?
Well, I don't know if you know who spiritual teacher Ram Dass is. He was a famous guy, and we were friends. And I was once at a workshop of his, and he had 400 people there, and he asked everybody to put in one sentence or less what got them into spirituality. And 80% of the people said psychedelic drugs, because it gives you an experience that there's a lot more going on than meets the eye. If you don't know that living in bliss and ecstasy and total love is possible, why would you beat yourself over the head with meditation and do all that searching if there's nothing to get there? So psychedelic drugs, when they work well, can give people an experience, a forevision of what's possible. When I took them, I decided that I would devote my life to trying to get into that same state of consciousness, but without the drugs.
Is that easy to do?
Evidently not that easy. Meaning, well, actually, my whole book, The Enlightenment Project, is about that. I don't know if you know, Rocky, but I've now interviewed 100 spiritual teachers, ranging from the late Mother Teresa, Wayne Dyer, and Ram Dass to the Dalai Lama, Deepak Chopra, Byron Katie, all these folks. So I was kind of on a mission. And my mission was to get the very best methods for experiencing expanded states of consciousness. And what I found was that a lot of people doing spiritual work are not getting that great results because they're using methods from 2,000 years old. These are the same people that wouldn't think of using a computer from 20 years old. And the methods for experiencing expanded states of consciousness are a lot more powerful and better than they were even 10 years ago. You know, my favorite, I talk about the top 20 methods in the Enlightenment Project. And a lot of them can be done in under 3 minutes. And a lot of them have amazingly powerful impact right away. But, you know, if you learn transcendental meditation or prayer or some other old methods that were popular years ago, or breath meditation, well, you got to do those for 30 years before you notice something.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
What inspired you to write the book?
I actually felt kind of a responsibility. I mean, how many people have interviewed and gotten to know Mother Teresa, the Dalai Lama, and everybody else? You know, it's been a wild ride. And I felt like, you know, I like shortcuts. I like, you know, just give me the information I most need. Some of the times I was on the Oprah show were for books I'd written called Shortcuts to Success or Shortcuts to Bliss. And I figured with all the information I gathered, I really owed it to, you know, other people to put out kind of the greatest hits of what really works in the spiritual realm in terms of experiencing enlightenment and expanded states of consciousness.
Since you've met all these people, are they as enlightened as everyone thinks they are?
That's a great question. Well, you know, people have a lot of misconceptions about what enlightenment is. At its most basic level, enlightenment always confers on its practitioners deep and lasting inner peace. But you can still have money problems. You can have relationship problems. You can have health problems. You know, it doesn't turn you into a god. It just turns you into somebody who always is in touch with inner peace and or love. And so I would say that some of these people had huge problems and they weren't that motivated to even work on the problems because why bother? I feel good. You know? So I saw some of them didn't really treat their mates that well or things like that. Not
surprising. Mm-hmm. We have images of people, and I have found more often than not, people aren't always in alignment with who they say they are.
Yeah. But, you know, when you go to a tennis player, when you're taking tennis lessons, you're not that concerned with how well they balance their checkbook. You're concerned with how good of a teacher of tennis they are. And for me, it was the same way. I wanted to know how to find inner peace and love. I wasn't going to them to find out how well they were, how good of a father or mother they were.
That makes a lot of sense. And I've always said because I think a lot of people get this confused, right? They think that because somebody is X, they're now an expert in everything. And more often than not, they are very bad at everything, but they're very good at X.
I have found that to be true.
Stick with X and don't ask them about Y. My classic example is I would never ask Warren Buffett how to raise a family, but I will take his financial advice.
Yeah. I was at a retreat with a famous teacher named Adyashanti. He's an American. And people were asking him question after question about raising their kids and their finances. And he kept saying, look, I know about consciousness. I know about inner peace. These other things, you know, they're not my area.
So in interviewing over 100 of these world-renowned people, what were some of the most surprising things you learned?
I'd say the most surprising thing I learned was that the methods they were using or that got them into a exalted experience of life were not known methods. They had invented their own method. Let me give an example. You know, people know about hatha yoga, people know about breath meditation and such. Those weren't the methods any of these people were using. What people were using was they kind of experimented with themselves and saw what kind of worked for them. Like one of the methods, which is very powerful, is a guy made a list of every person he had ever loved or greatly appreciated. It came out to like 100 people. And he'd spend a minute on each person thinking about what he loved and appreciated about that person. And then he'd go on to the next. Well, you spend an hour bathing yourself in love and appreciation. That has an effect on you. And soon he found that he wasn't just spending that hour in love and appreciation. He found that he was always in love with everybody all the time. So, that's not a method that you can read in a book other than the Enlightenment Project, but it is something that a few of the people said that that's what they do to meditate.
It almost sounds like a gratitude type of thing that some people do, is just to think of things that you're grateful for. And some people will journal with it and so forth. It seems to be along the same concept. Or is it different?
Well, think of it, there's many entryways to higher states of consciousness. One would be love. Another would be gratitude. Actually, a funny story. When I interview a lot of people, a lot of them mention that gratitude was a major doorway to enlightenment and to higher states of being. So a friend of mine had come back from India, and he looked totally lit up, like he was just, as happy as could be. I said, what happened? He said, well, my guru gave me a magical mantra for helping me feel gratitude all the time. Well, I always want the best technique. So I asked him, what was the mantra? And he said, I can't give it to you. You have to go and get directly from the guru. Have you been to India, Rocky?
I was there a couple of weeks ago.
Well, it's a hard place to travel in. Anyways, so I fly 18,000 miles to get this, stupid mantra. And, I take a rickshaw for 3 hours to the ashram. I have to wait in line 3 hours to talk to the guru. I finally get a chance to talk to him. I'm kind of pissed off that I'm having to do this. And I tell him I want this mantra for feeling gratitude. So he says in his Indian accent, yes, my mantra is the most powerful mantra on earth. He leans in to whisper in my ear. I'm not even breathing. I don't want to miss a syllable, and he says, whenever possible, repeat these words. The mantra I give you are the words, thank you. I look at him, I think he's joking with me, but he's not smiling. I say, that's it? I traveled 18,000 miles to get thank you? That's it? And he said, no. That's it is the mantra you have been using. That makes you feel like you never have enough. My mantra is thank you, not that's it. That's it will take you nowhere. So I look at him and I say, well, thanks for nothing. And he says, thanks for nothing is not the mantra. You must say it from your heart. So when you eat good food, say thank you. When you see your child or a sunset or your pet, say thank you. Feel your heart for 5 seconds. Say thank you to creation, and soon you'll be filled with gratitude. Well, the funny thing, Rocky, is it actually does work. I like simple methods, and I will stop 20 times a day and say thank you for this to creation, and it really does create more happiness and even more peace.
It's pretty simple.
Yeah, it doesn't get much simpler than that. I kind of specialize in methods that take under a minute to do because I'm lazy.
Now, why wouldn't your friend share that?
I think, the idea that you really have to you have to value something. Going on that pilgrimage, I use this mantra every day, whereas I bet most of your listeners won't be using it every day because they didn't pay the price. That's how the human mind often works, unfortunately.
So I'm like you, I'm lazy. I like other people to pay the price. And then I can just say thank you.
Well, that's what I tried to do in the book. I spent 40 years getting the greatest hits from all the greatest teachers. And, for $14.95, people can hopefully learn what they need to learn.
So what are some of the other techniques that you've learned that are so simple to implement?
Well, one would be, a lot of times when we're upset, it's because we're focusing our biggest problem or challenge. Think of a big whiteboard with a little black dot on it, the size of a dime. Well, most of us, call that black dot our biggest problem. Most of us, the way we work in our lives is we put our eyeball directly on that black dot. and then say, it's nothing but black. It's totally dark and it goes on forever and there's no hope and no whiteness anywhere. Meanwhile, if you move back a few inches, you see that it's an entire whiteboard with a little black dot. So one method I like, I call it the include method. So you're aware of some challenge, some conversation didn't go well, some anxiety. And then you say, well, what else is going on? Well, I feel my feet on the floor. What else is going on? Well, I hear someone in the next room making some sounds. What else is going on? I'm taking a deep breath. What else is going on? I'm aware that I'm aware in this moment and that I'm becoming more present. What else is going on? I feel a sense of gratitude that I have an easy day in front of me. So it's a way of expanding our limited mind to include all the things happening in the present moment, not just our biggest problem.
Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. I kind of look at it somewhat similar in that if you look at the Earth in comparison to the universe, you realize what an insignificant speck we are.
Right. Yeah.
Especially in the timeline of history as well. If you actually think about it, it's all pretty much irrelevant. And yet here we are fussing about it while I look out the window and somehow nature and the planet are all just getting along fine no matter what. And nobody's even working at making sure it happens.
Yeah. And unfortunately, the human mind is very geared towards looking for problems. And it's good at it. It had survival value thousands of years ago. But nowadays, it can just kind of make you miserable if you take it too seriously.
Is there a simple way to turn that off?
A sledgehammer, but I don't recommend that.
No other experts have an idea?
Well, certain drugs can do it. And there are a bunch of meditation methods I recommend. If people are interested, when I interview people for my podcast, Awareness Explorers, I ask them, give me your best 10-minute guided meditation. So, I have the best 10-minute guided meditations from the best teachers on the planet. And I give them all away for free at awarenessexplorers.com. And then in the navigation bar is meditations. And there's 100 meditations there. And they all are really good at quieting the mind. Different people like different things. So I suggest that people try a few out and see which ones get their mind to just be quiet really quickly.
So it's just a matter of testing because everyone is different. And what worked for one person isn't necessarily going to work for the next.
Exactly. It's hard for people to get that.
It's because everybody's looking for a prescription.
Uh-huh.
They're not looking to actually do what needs to be done. They want, the same thing happens in the world of medicine. They just want a pill.
Yeah.
They don't want to do the work to actually get to what they need to be.
Yeah. Well, I understand it. I'm lazy too. That's why I have focused on trying to get the easiest ways to get there. But the truth is that different things do work for different people. So you do have to do some exploring.
You have to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else with regards to that book that we should talk about?
Well, there's a researcher named Dr. Jeffrey Martin, a Harvard psychologist, who studied 1,200 enlightened people over decades. And he wanted to find out anything he could about them. But he found out there were just like a handful of methods that worked really well, like a dozen methods. And most of those methods were pretty unknown. So I include most of those methods in the book because they really are like power tools. You know, I was working on my deck the other day, trying to saw a board, you know, with one of those hand saws. And I said, you know, this is ridiculous. I went out and bought a power saw and could cut those boards in 4 seconds rather than, 20 minutes. And some methods that have been invented in the last 3 years really do quiet the mind and open the heart better than other methods. So he found that when people, quote, became enlightened, there were actually 4 different types of enlightenment. And they have very different experiences. And some work really well in the world, and some do not work well in the world. Meaning, you're not going to be able to have a business and be in a certain type of enlightenment. It just won't work. Whereas some types of enlightenment, each that have different characteristics, make you a very pleasant and very effective human being. So he tried to decipher what led to what and kind of create a science of enlightenment based on data. I asked him on my podcast, Awareness Explorers, what surprised him. And he said, everything surprised me because all the things that the teachers thought about enlightenment was not true in the data. And all the things the consciousness researchers thought about enlightenment also wasn't true in the data. So we've learned more about enlightenment in the last year than we have in the last 50,000 years.
What are some of those things that he learned that were counterintuitive?
Well, he learned that one of the things that surprised him was that if you match up a person with a technique that works really well for them, rather than thinking it can take 20 years for them to become enlightened, for some of those people, it took 20 days.
So it was quicker.
It was not quicker by a few 100%, by a few 10,000s of percent. Like, rather than meditating an hour a day for 40 years, these people were meditating for an hour a day for 2 weeks. And they managed to get into a state of persistent peace. That really surprised him. Another thing that surprised him was that there were different types of enlightenment. He thought enlightenment just meant one thing. No, it really ended up being 4 totally different experiences. They all have peace and love at their core, but some of them are more saint-like, like maybe Mother Teresa, and some are more based on love, and some are more based on peace and awareness.
Interesting how that all kind of comes together. It doesn't surprise me, though, that what everyone says is the way to something never seems to be. And I think that goes back to, I heard someone talking about Buddha, and he said Buddha spent all those years in the forest doing what all the teachers said, and he didn't find enlightenment. Yeah. And at the same time, most of those people aren't enlightened either.
Yeah.
So you have to find your path. And I think that's where people struggle. They all want, as we said before, somebody to lay out the roadmap. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why people get stuck in life, because they want someone else to lay out their roadmap of what they should do with their life, where they see somebody and they're like, oh, I want to be like them, but they aren't willing to do the work, or they may not have within them the skills to do what that person does.
Yeah, well, that's true. Now, another thing Dr. Martin learned was that under one specific form of enlightenment, people were extremely good at manifesting, like almost like a magical, miraculous ability that whatever they wanted did seem to come to pass, and in unusual ways. And I've touched upon this form of enlightenment for moments, and it's really fun because, you think of someone and they call you 1 minute later, or you want the parking space, or you need new glasses, and you find an old pair that was, laying around a minute later. It's really a lot of fun.
Is there a secret to making it work? Because I think there's a lot of people who sit around wanting to manifest stuff and nothing happens.
Well, This guy has studied different manifestation techniques. You know, we all know about The Secret and the law of attraction. Really, these are states of consciousness that when you get in a specific vibration, good things tend to happen. So there are techniques that he found to be much more effective than others for getting into that state. And he teaches those. I have some of them in the Enlightenment Project book. And some of them are hard to do. Some of them are easy to do. But they do seem to lead to an incredible abundance of synchronicities and good things happening in your life. He calls it the charmed life, where it's almost like the universe is conspiring to do you good.
What's one of the easy ways to get in that state?
I'm trying to think if there's an easy way. The two techniques I know are actually rather challenging to do, but I'll describe one of them. It's called the Bengston healing method. And you make a list of like a dozen things that you want in your life with an image as to you having succeeded at getting that. And then you cycle through these images really quick, not even just 1 second, like 1 second for all 12 of them. So it becomes like a blur. And it ends up, if you do that and you get into the state where you're like seeing these images really quickly going through your brain, it helps to, he has actual evidence in scientific journals that shows that he can cure cancer in rats by doing this method. And the scientific establishment doesn't like it because the evidence is completely unequivocal. He can do it he's done it with thousands of rats that have cancer and just cured them all using this method. But there's no theoretical basis for how that's happening. It just seems to put out an energy that helps to create your intention. Pretty weird stuff.
And I've heard stories of people when they create a vision board, even if they just create it and stop looking at it, over time, a lot of the things on that vision board come to be.
Yeah, our minds are goal-striving mechanisms. So if you give your mind a very clear goal, an image, that does make it more likely that you will be able to achieve that goal.
Are there apps you can buy that will take all your pictures and rapidly send them to you?
Actually, I don't know about that. That's a good idea, though. I personally don't know about that, though.
There you go. You have a new business product coming out.
Right.
Anything on that book? Because I know you have some other books that I'd like to touch on a little bit.
Let me think if there's there's a chapter in the Enlightenment Project about money. And another chapter about right livelihood, about career. And, you know, those are two subjects that people rarely put in the same box or the same book. And I thought it was important because, you know, money is an important part of life as well. And in my own case, I saw how it's very easy when you start to make money to like veer from the spiritual path. So I talk about money traps, things like greed, things like always feeling like you don't have enough. And I talk about the antidotes to that because, you know, I want to be successful. I like living in a nice house, but I don't want to fall into the traps of thinking like, I remember when I was living in my van, I thought, man, if I could make $20,000 a year, I would have it made, you know? And that number has kept on going up and up and up. And it's always more than what you're making, you know, it seems like. So, you know, using things like gratitude and other things to make sure you use money doesn't use you. And you might know this, there's what's called peak happiness of money, which is about $75,000 a year. Once a person's making about $75,000 a year, more money does not make them any happier.
We're going to have to adjust that for inflation these days. But yes, I agree with the concept. It is funny because I know that even in my own life, the goalposts always move. You're always setting a new financial target. You hit it, and then a new one comes up. And so it's that constant striving for more.
Mm-hmm. I think that the pursuit of enlightenment and peace can be a really good balance to that, because the mind always wants more, but the spirit is always happy and fully alive in the present. And I think of it like two wings of a plane. If you're just pursuing money, it's like one wing of a plane that's very strong. Well, you'll likely go around in circles and then crash. Or if you're just pursuing spirit and just meditating your way, well, then your lack of money will be like a weak wing, and then you might go around in circles and crash. So it's really a matter of having two strong wings so you can soar.
We call it harmony, because I find when you use the word balance, people get stuck in trying to figure out how to balance everything. And the reality is you can't be perfect at it.
Right.
Whereas within harmony, different things take precedence at different points in life and at different times. And this way you can kind of flow through all of that and understand that not every minute of every day is going to be perfectly balanced.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, the other chapter I have in the Enlightenment Project about money is really about career. Like, how do you find work that's meaningful to you? And, I've been very lucky in that I've been able to do that. And I give people a little technique or analogy. I don't know if you ever played the hot and cold game as a kid, Rocky, where somebody hides something, they tell you if you're getting warmer or cooler. Well, imagine that the universe is playing the hot and cold game with you and I. And the message is, when something feels really good or you're getting really good results, that's the universe saying you're getting warmer. Go in that direction. When something feels meaningless or boring or you're getting really bad results, that's the universe saying you're freezing. Go somewhere else. So we need to listen to the messages the universe gives us, and it'll point us to where we really should be.
And that's the one thing I notice. I think here in the U.S., people take jobs to make money, and most people are in the wrong jobs, and then they're all miserable. They don't have the time to think. They
haven't listened to that hot and cold game. They're denying it, and usually the results aren't very good.
No, they aren't. I wish it would make everyone's life a lot nicer if every time you went somewhere or dealt with a business that the people working there were thrilled to be there, because we'd all have a better experience.
I think so. Yeah.
Unfortunately, that doesn't happen. You've actually written a few books on money and building wealth and how it kind of mixes in with spirituality. Is there anything in those books that stands out that we haven't covered yet?
Yeah, a couple things. One is, I always have people look at their relationship with money. If money were a person and you had a relationship with that person, what would that person say to you? It'd probably say, you never appreciate me. You're always saying I'm not enough. You're always saying that I need to do more for you. And after all I do for you, is this the thanks I get? That's totally unfair. So I like to treat money well and be thankful and appreciative of it. And I think that force is appreciative of my attention that way. And, it certainly makes my career more fun.
And that's one of the reasons I asked you the first question I asked you was, how did you learn about money growing up? Because that programming follows through into adulthood unless you've done something to rewire it. And you mentioned that you did things
at a young rewiring,
age.
yeah.
Yes,
right.
To change that relationship with money. Most people don't do that. And most people don't even know that the programming's running. That conversation with money is happening in the back of their subconscious, and they're not even part of it. And then they're always wondering why they're struggling.
Right.
Because they haven't fixed it.
I invented a technique to keep me motivated, and I taught this technique to thousands of people. It'll be somewhat striking, but each week I write down a bunch of things I want to make sure I do by the end of the week. Things I might not normally do, but I know would be good for me. Like meditate, exercise, take the dog to the vet, whatever it is. And then I say, if I fail to do any of these things by 1 week from today, I will take out $2 and rip it up.
So
now, I don't like ripping up money, so it's a very good motivation.
What we tell people to do is to pick a group or charity that they're morally opposed to and make the donation to that if it doesn't occur. So it's the same concept.
Same concept, yeah.
Same concept of picking something that you are not thrilled with and using it as a motivator to get you to do what you need to do.
Mm-hmm. Now, something else I think about money in terms of reprogramming is I say, imagine that $50,000 lands in your lap tomorrow and you have to spend it all this year. Where would you put the money dollar for dollar? What exactly would you use that for? And make sure you're excited about each of those things. So you can't even save it, you know. And most people have things like, oh, I'd really like to take this course. I'd really like to go to Tahiti. And once again, it gets you to think in terms of how money can actually benefit your life specifically. And I think that's important.
It is. I don't think money doesn't have emotions. We do. Mm-hmm. Money is nothing more than a tool. And it's just a question of how well do we use our tools, or do we misunderstand our tools and try to do the wrong thing with them, which more often than not, I think is what happens.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I do is I take 10% of my income and I give it away. I put it in a separate account. And sometimes it's charities, but sometimes it's doing nice things for friends. And that always feels really good. So that was a habit I started out when I was about 16. And I think that helped to reprogram my view of money as well.
Not having such a tight grip on it, learning to let go and learning to plant a little, and it will grow and come back to you in a variety of different ways.
Mm-hmm.
One of the books that you talked about was the technology of joy and using apps and gadgets. And I think more often than not, it seems like our gadgets are taking away our joy instead of bringing us joy. How have you been able to find, or what have you been able to find to kind of turn the tide on that?
Well, you're right that what we have now are a bunch of WMDs, which are widgets of mass distraction. In the technology of joy, I review my 101 favorite gadgets. And there are, everything, there's no good or bad. There's gadgets that work for you to better your life and gadgets that don't. So, for example, I have a little back massager gadget. Well, I have a bad back, so it's really nice to use that. Saves me a lot of chiropractic bills, and that's a good gadget. I can even do it while talking to someone. There are gadgets. Let's see if I can find it right here. Looks like I might not be able to. I have gadgets that massage my hands in a way that stimulates acupuncture points. And that feels really good. So, and because I have money, I now have a sauna and a hot tub. In this crazy world, you need all the relaxation you can get, and those gadgets help my life. Some gadgets, having a really, really good pillow for my bed made a difference. So it's really a matter of finding things that make your life better or more comfortable, or even healthier. I take 40 supplements a day. Now, as I mentioned to you before the broadcast, Rocky, I have COVID right now. And I'm having a very easy time with it because I take really good care of myself. I've only been sick for 5 days in the last 10 years. And so, a really good supplement that makes your health better, that's an important gadget.
So and I always think of gadgets more so as the phone, but you're widening that description out considerably.
Yeah.
And to the things that can help you and make your life a little bit better. One of the other areas that you talk about is communication for couples. Mm-hmm. And I kind of find it hilarious because I find most couples are talking different languages and neither one of them are listening to each other.
Totally true. Actually, I wrote this book, Communication Miracles for Couples. And one of the times I was on the Oprah show, she said it was the best communication book ever written. So it sold like 1 million copies and did really well. And you're right that, we don't have training on how to communicate with each other. And I think everybody would benefit from learning how to communicate effectively. And most people haven't had that experience. So when they learn a few really simple things that, can avoid arguments or solve problems, then they find that their relationships go better. And as we said, relationships are the key to happiness.
So can you give us an example of one or two of those things that people can do to have better communications with their spouse?
Yeah. One thing is that people understanding what everybody wants, and everybody wants empathy and understanding. I never have couples come in to my office and say, we understand each other really well, that's why we want a divorce. And the best way to show understanding and empathy is I have a little formula, which is whenever somebody's telling their story about their challenge, you say, it sounds like blank. And you just say a few words. It sounds like it was a really horrible day, or it sounds like you're upset about the traffic, or that must feel really frustrating. Just giving people empathy like that can go a long way towards solving a lot of problems. I also have what I call a problem-solving question, which is, asking your partner, considering both our needs here, what are a couple ideas that you think might work better for both of us? Rather than focus on blame, which never works, you focus on solving problems by negotiation. And these are skills that are easily learned, but most people don't take the time to learn them.
Why not?
That's a good question. It's not in our school system. And I guess they just don't understand that you're right, that people are speaking different languages, and that if you could speak a language that your partner's speaking, things would go a lot better. We tend to think like we rather get lost in I'm right and they're wrong. And of course, that never helps.
Surprising.
Yeah, I'm batting 0 for 500 on that with my wife. Telling her how wrong she is about something and seeing if she then changes her ways so far. But, you never know. It might be the 501st effort is going to make all the difference.
You should keep trying.
I'll let her know you said so, Rocky.
Are there any topics we should have covered today but didn't get a chance to?
Well, here's a quick story. What's the meaning and purpose of life? We'll end with something simple like that. When I interviewed 100 people, I would ask them that question. And then I stopped after a while because all of them started to say the exact same answer. And when you can get Mother Teresa, the Dalai Lama, Pat Boone, and Deepak Chopra agreeing what the meaning of life is, then you have something there. So for a measly $14.95, people can find out what the meaning of life is. No, I'm kidding you. Because they're listening to your podcast, Rocky, you get it for free. Okay, so the meaning and purpose of life, according to 100 spiritual experts, is number one, do whatever you can to find peace inside you. Number two, once you have peace and love inside you that you can tap into, from your abundance, go out and help people. Pretty simple, but most people aren't that good at these, and they do require training. A quick story, which we could possibly end on, is I was in India visiting another guru, and when I entered his ashram, he said, sit in front of me. So I sat in front of him, and he looked at me really kind of intensely and said, who are you? And I said, I'm Jonathan Robinson from the United States. And he and the other people in the room just started laughing. And I thought, well, that was probably the wrong answer. So he said, no, who are you really? And I went through different roles. I'm an author, I'm a psychotherapist, I'm a husband. And he kept nodding his head no. And finally, I ran out of roles, and I just looked him in the eyes. And I saw that in his eyes, there was literally light beams shining out of his eyes. I'd never seen that before, so I got kind of transfixed. As I'm looking at his eyes and the light coming out, a wave of love hit me that was so intense that I just broke down sobbing. And as I'm sobbing in his lap, feeling all this love and peace, he says to me, this love and peace is who you really are, and your job in life is to get back to that. And that has stayed with me. I think that is our job in life.
And that answer isn't found out there, it's found within.
For better or worse, it's found within.
It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
My secret is to find joy, love, and peace within you and figure out what things lead to that on a daily basis.
And that almost requires some thinking time.
It can.
Analytics. Well, I mean, how else will you figure it out if you don't think about it?
Yeah, I agree. And I think everybody has their unique path to those feelings and finding it within themselves. And your mission, should you decide to accept it, is to figure out how you achieve those experiences.
What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
I wish I'd learned how showing love and sharing vulnerability with other people added a depth and beauty to life that I didn't know in my younger years.
And Brene Brown did a lot with showing how vulnerability, especially for men, makes such a big difference in life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she does great stuff.
If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
I think I would say that try a few different types of meditation and find one that helps you to relax, feel good, because one thing is certain in the future. It's going to be stressful. So you need somewhere to go inside yourself that you can let it all go and find some peace.
You mean after all this enlightenment and love and stuff, we're still going to have stress?
Well, the world's going to be stressful. If you're finding enlightenment, you won't be stressed, but the world will continue to be a crap show, I'm sure.
Nice. If people would like to learn more about you, your books, and so forth, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, they can find out about the Enlightenment Project and get 5 free, again, ebook with 5 of my favorite techniques for free at theenlightenmentproject.net. And if they want to listen to my podcast where I interview spiritual leaders, that's at Awareness Explorers, and they can get the episodes at awarenessexplorers.com.
And we'll put that into the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Great, Rocky. It was a lot of fun.
Was that what you were expecting? Any actionable steps to take away? The studies with using drugs to help people through their anxiety is interesting. And it seems like the government is finally opening up in this area. The reality is we waste too much time on therapy, and it never seems to provide much in the way of results for so many people. It just hasn't worked as much as it should have. Maybe this will. We'll dig into this more in a future episode. How is your relationship with yourself and with money? I'm not an expert, but I see most people struggle. And the first step is always awareness. It's like an onion. You have to keep peeling the layers to get to the real cause. I encourage you to peel. If you enjoy or got value from Richer Soul today, I'd appreciate it if you would support it by forwarding it to a friend or sharing it wherever you typically share other podcasts. Next week, we have on Gaurav and Mark to chat about the concept of unfear. It's not being fearless, totally different. I know you'll love it. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.